ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षातात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामच्युतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्. Namo Ramana. In this Friday Atma Vichara Satsang session from the Ramanacentre of Bangalore, Ramanacentre for Learning Bangalore, we usually read out a question and answer from the book Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation which is done by our founder, President Shri A.R. Natarajanji, of all the questions put to Bhagavan by many devotees on the subject matter of Atma Vichara and Bhagavan's reply to it. We usually read out the question and answer and we meditate on the answer given by Bhagavan by his abundant grace. And following that, we have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session. Then our President Sarada Akka would be talking about Atma Vichara as it has been contemplated in Ramana Gita, which is again a question and answer put to Bhagavan and been captured in Sanskrit by Ganapati Muni. And finally, we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. In the last week question and answer, the question was put to Bhagavan about Hatha Yoga and its importance. Hatha Yoga and its aid for self-enquiry. And the same question is being continued this week, and in the sense that and the next question, question number 87, is a continuation on the same subject matter of Hatha Yoga. So for clarity, I will read out both the question answers, and then we will meditate on it. The 86th question that is put to Bhagavan by the devotee is, it is said that the Hatha Yoga is a necessary aid for self-enquiry. Hatha Yoga is the normal yoga practice that we talk about these days. And he is asking, it is said that the Hatha Yoga is a necessary aid for self-enquiry. Bhagavan answers the question. The Hatha yogis claim to keep the body fit so that the enquiry may be effected without obstacles. They also say that life must be prolonged so that the enquiry may be carried to a successful end. Furthermore, there are those who use some medicines with that end in view. Their favorite example is the screen must be perfect before the painting is begun. Yes, but which is the screen and which the painting? According to them, the body is the screen and the enquiry into the self is the painting. But is not the body itself a picture on the screen, the self? Continuing on that question, the devotee says, but Hatha Yoga is so much spoken as an aid. Bhagavan says, yes, even great Pandits, well versed in the Vedanta, continue the practice of it. Otherwise, their minds will not subside. So you may say it is useful for those who cannot otherwise still the mind. Here, Bhagavan is saying that the importance of a practice to keep the body intact in the form of an Hatha Yoga or in the form of a medicine, so that it will help me to practice, so that it will aid me to reach the final goal, is like trying to keep, and it is like saying that this body is the screen on which this exercise or this sadhana is the practice that we do can be done well if that screen is kept well. But that is such a wrong approach, says Bhagavan here, because the body, the practice, is all nothing but a film on the self. The self is the actual screen. The self is that entity which doesn't go through any transformation, whether it is in the waking or in the dream or in the sleep. It continues to be there. And the waking, the dream, and the sleep come and go. And I am aware of all of them coming and going. Therefore, the self, the pure consciousness, the pure presence that I am, is the unchanging thing. And it doesn't even claim that I am witnessing something. It is the screen on which everything comes and goes. But that I am neither increases nor decreases by the effect of whatever comes and goes. It continues to be I am. No matter what all experiences we may undergo, the degree of I am never changes. That is, the screen is unaffected by the picture. And therefore it is called Achyuta. Achyuta is the name of the Lord, that which is not touched. Achyuta is something which gets touched by something. Achyuta is really that which never gets touched. And we can here and now experience, no matter what has been our journey in this life, the degree of that I am or the pure I am is neither it's least affected by any of it. And Bhagavan is asking us to recognize that is what we are by the enquiry, who am I? And to abide in that no matter what all pictures come and go. Not to get carried away by the pictures, by the commentary on the pictures. To be in that I am and realize the freedom, the natural freedom that one has as I am, which is what is our real nature. It is so natural, then why we need to hold on to the body, why we need to maintain it with some hatha yoga, with some medicines, so that sadhana may be continued. When it is so natural, the I am is so natural, so untouched, and that is what we are here and now. Why give so much of importance to the sadhana? Why give so much importance to the body that has to be, to take that body to be oneself and then do the sadhana? So Bhagavan is saying, what we have taken to be the screen, is it correct? We have taken the body to be the screen, is it the right approach? In another example, Bhagavan says, the I, which is the pure self, which is the pure I am, is like the ocean, which is untouched, which is nothing but water. And I, the individual idea, which includes I am this body, I am this name, is like the bubble on that water. And that bubble is also nothing but the water itself. But if I were to say I have to keep the bubble intact so that I can understand better about the ocean, the answer would be, if the bubble is broken, it becomes the ocean itself. What else is a better understanding, being the ocean itself, than trying to understand as a pandit? Here, that's why Bhagavan in the second example says, even pandit, well versed in Vedanta, continue the practice of it, continue the practice of keeping the body intact, so that the sadhana can be done. But here Bhagavan's solution for us, or Bhagavan's purpose of who am I, is not to have an intellectual understanding, but to be that pure I am, to burst the bubble so that the ocean alone remains, and therefore the fullness of that ocean can be experienced. Here, therefore, Bhagavan is saying it is important that we, though the intellectual understanding of this is very important, but we should not get stuck in the intellectual understanding alone. We should experience that I am. And therefore, Bhagavan has given us, whenever the ego rises in the form of a thought, as the bubble, he asks us to diligently inquire, to whom is this? Because it is for me, it cannot be for somebody else. By putting this question whenever a thought rises, we can see that the bubble has arisen by a bubble has got formed in the ocean. Only when we see the bubble in the form of a thought, we can put the question, to whom is this bubble? And we see that it is for me, the bubble. It is I. And then when we inquire, who am I? And try to seek the real source of the bubble, then we find that the real source of the bubble is the ocean. What I refer to as I is my pure I am, my own existence. And Bhagavan gives another example that why that is the paroksha anubhava. All other people, if I am in the discourse here, even in this satsang that we can see, for me to experience others, either they have to speak or I have to see their picture. But to experience myself, I don't need my eyes, my nose, my tongue, to know that I am. It is a direct experience. I don't need any other, I don't even need a mind and a thought to say I am. I experience myself directly, because I am the pure being, the pure consciousness which knows everything. It is I who know all. When the thought rises, I know, then also the pure consciousness is aware of it. When the thought rises, I don't know, then also the pure consciousness is aware of it. And that is why our true nature is that of knowledge, of jnana. So Bhagavan says, in that there is no increase of knowledge or decrease of knowledge. It is always aware, period. There is no change in the degree of awareness. And therefore, with this questioning of who am I, the thought which has a degree of knowledge is inquired, or a degree of ignorance that I don't know is inquired. To whom is this? And then the answer will naturally come, it is for me. And what do I really refer to as me? Who am I? And by turning the attention through this question, we recognize that I am the pure being, the pure consciousness, not this name, this form which I take to be I. The real I that I am referring to is myself, the pure direct experience. And therefore, instead of getting carried away by the thought, this who am I makes it an opportunity. The thought becomes an opportunity to break the bubble and become the ocean again. And therefore, it helps us to experience the final goal. The path itself is nothing but the goal. With every inquiry, with effort, we are reaching the goal. And Bhagavan says this practice should continue until all the enemies in the fort, in the mind, which we have taken to be ourself, and which we have taken to be real, which is all in the form of innumerable seeds, all rises in the form of thought, and we slay all the enemies with the inquiry, who am I? Until the last enemy is also slayed. Then the fort becomes captured. That means the pure silence of the self alone remains. Until such time, Bhagavan asks us to diligently inquire every thought so that we can, by inquiring, move our attention, which was outward turned, towards the self, the only truth, only real thing which exists. All others are only momentary and transitory. None of them is real. The pure awareness, the pure being alone is the one which is there, which doesn't go through any transformation. And therefore, that is the only Satyam, that is the only truth. Satyam, and it is the Param, and it is the Dhimahi. So, with Bhagavan's abundant grace, with which alone we have come to this most direct path, for the next 20 minutes, no matter how many thoughts come, no matter whatever is the nature of the thought, whether it is good, bad, ugly, spiritual, we need to recognize it is nothing but a bubble in the ocean. And therefore, inquire to whom is this? Recognize it is for me. And therefore, inquire who am I? And turn the attention back to the source of I, what we call as I, the pure being, the pure consciousness. And with repeated practice, Bhagavan assures that the mind will become pure and gain the enough strength to remain at the source. This abundant grace, for the next 20 minutes, let us practice Atma Vichara. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana. Over to Sarada Akka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. With the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, in this part of the satsang, we are meditating on the text called Ramana Gita. It is a compilation of answers given by Bhagavan Ramana to questions by various seekers of truth. Most of them were disciples of Ganapati Muni already, and when Ganapati Muni became a disciple of Bhagavan, all of them also automatically surrendered to Bhagavan Ramana, and Ganapati Muni encouraged them to ask questions, to pose their doubts to Bhagavan, because Muni was very keen on recording Bhagavan's answers to various spiritual doubts. And he was having this concept of putting it together as a Gita. He had already begun to do that. And then he went ahead to compile these answers into 18 chapters, which is called the Ramana Gita. The chapters are about the nature of self-awareness, the important duty to be performed, then how to control the mind, self-enquiry, and various other chapters. We have also crossed the chapter on ashrama vichara, that is the 4 stages, 4 prescribed stages of life. That was the preceding chapter, and we are now on the 9th chapter, which is called Cutting the Knot or Granthi Veda. The first question, this is the questioner in this chapter is the Muni himself, and he asked Bhagavan, what is the nature of this Granthi? Because the scriptures talk about this knot, the knot which has to be cut. Even Swami Shivananda has a song, Cut the Knot of Avidya. So this is said to be ignorance or avidya or the illusion of I am the body is called a knot, Bhagavan says. Bhagavan says the knot is that which arises, which links the consciousness with the body. And he has explained this in his 40 verses also. Later, much later, Ulladu Narpadu was composed in the 1920s, 1930s after Muruganar Swami came to meet Bhagavan. Here Bhagavan has already described something similar. He says, see, the self is unbound. Consciousness is unbound. Consciousness does not say, I am so and so, I have a birth, because it is totally free. And this body also doesn't say, I was born on such and such a date, this is happening to me. None of our bodily experiences are recorded by the body or reported by the body. So there is an entity, says Bhagavan, which rises between the two and links the two. There is you can call it a mysterious entity. It is an entity which takes the consciousness or reflects the consciousness and links it with the body and says, I am the body. I am aware of being a body. So because it is a link or because it binds the two, it is called a knot. Now, the process of getting self-knowledge is to unravel the knot or cut the knot or travel the bridge back to consciousness. If we could call it a bridge, Bhagavan uses it more as a bridge than as a knot. A knot has a negative connotation in a way because it's something which has come between two things, but Bhagavan uses it as a bridge back to consciousness because he says, this knot, which is actually a mystical entity or a subtle entity, it has the characteristics of consciousness because it reflects the consciousness. It picks up the consciousness and it reflects it or superimposes it on the body. So when it is associated with the body, when it is thinking I am body, and when it's working within the realm of the thought I am the body, it is a limited entity. But when this is questioned and when it is allowed to turn back to its source, it remains as a reflection, pure reflection of consciousness, that is called the Shuddha Manas or the pure mind. So the same knot, the same ego which turns us outwards, Bhagavan is telling us it can also be used as a clue to get back to the source. So in this chapter, Bhagavan has told us how this experience occurs or how this identification with the body happens. He says that there is within us a location which he has already spoken about in the chapter 5 on the spiritual heart. He has told us there is within us what is called the spiritual heart, different from the physical heart. The spiritual heart, which is the center of the awareness I am. That spiritual heart is the center of consciousness. It is called a center because when so long as one is identified with the body, there is a boundary, and Bhagavan says there has to be a locus within that boundary where the consciousness is actually centered. And from that center, it expands or moves to the rest of the body. So what does it do? It moves from the heart center to the mind center, which is called Sahasrara, or which is called physically, it's called the brain. It is only a locale, or the Sahasrara is a subtle center for the mind. From there, the energy spreads through subtle channels which are called nadis throughout the body. It's like an electric system in a house. You know, when we have the source, the electrical energy source, and that comes into our main power, which is like the Sahasrara. From there, through the electrical wires, it moves to different parts of the house. So now this energy, it moves through all the sense organs. We are able to see, hear, whichever organ is lit by this consciousness, whichever sense organ. Supposing somebody has got visual challenge, that means that channel, that nadi, the consciousness has not moved through that nadi. There is some block in the movement of consciousness in that channel. So that channel doesn't work. But in a normal, so-called normal situation, all the five senses are there, and we have these sense experiences, and we also have subtle experiences. This is how Bhagavan says, the moment the energy moves outward like this and becomes associated with the body, immediately the thought arises, oh, I am this body. And we see a world which is apart from us. So the division between myself and the world occurs, says Bhagavan, and then we become engaged in the world. We not only become engaged in the world, we get caught in our engagement in the world. We become attached to our engagement with the world, and this is called samsara, and the person becomes a samsari, says Bhagavan. What is the reverse process? The reverse process is to understand. Here he says, Bhagavan says that when one asks oneself the question, who am I? Then a churning begins in all these nadis. All the energy which was just going outward, externalized, it starts turning inward. But then by force of habit, it goes outward, in, out. So what happens is, it becomes what is called a churning. It's an up and down, it's an in and out, it's a churning. And as the churning goes on, what happens is that sometimes negative things also get thrown out, good things also come out. We see everything. Everything becomes clear to us. What is in our mind, that becomes clear to us. One by one, it becomes clear to us. And after the churning is over, then what happens is that it remains the attention which was externalized becomes interned, and it remains only with what is called the Amrita Nadi, that channel which took the consciousness to the Sahasrara. The energy moves back into that channel. When it remains only with the Amrita Nadi, then one becomes self-aware, says Bhagavan. And he begins to tell us how that person who is self-aware is different from the person who is engaged in the world. So, in the first part, when he uses this, he is giving us, when he says how it moves outward, the energy, he gives us a clue as to how to take it back inside. So Bhagavan says, when thoughts arise, thoughts are world, thoughts are other, thoughts are objects. So when thoughts arise, instead of paying attention to the thoughts, to objects, we ask ourselves, for whom is the thought? So the attention which moves through the nadis to various parts of the world and to the body, and from various parts of the body out into the world, gets withdrawn back into the eye center, which is the Sahasrara, or the mind center, and the I thought. It comes back when we answer, these thoughts are for me. Then when we ask, who am I? The attention goes back to the source. Where from does this I get the energy? Where from do I get my energy? It has to be from within me, not from outside. So where from? What is the source of my consciousness? Because I, as a limited entity, say I as Sarada, I as so and so, disappear every day in deep sleep, and then I resurface with a lot of energy. So there must be an energy source. Which is that? So when I ask who am I, we are turning back to that. So Bhagavan says, when consciousness stays in the supreme channel only, then self alone shines. And for such a one, he says, even though the world may be experienced, Sannidhyat bhasamanava na prithak pratitishthati. Though the objects are seen by the jnani, he does not see them as apart from himself. So he is not ruffled by any actions or any happenings in this world. He does not turn his attention upon A or B. He does not weigh any events. He does not judge any person. There is nothing, there is no externalization at all. Because there is nothing apart from him, he says. Na prithak. There is nothing apart from the self. So there is nothing to be judged. There is nothing to be evaluated. There is nothing to be attained. So his mind does not move anywhere, and he sees only the self, antar bahischa sarvascha. Everywhere it is. So the self alone shines everywhere, just as the name and form are prevalent for the one who is attached to the body. Then Bhagavan says, again, he goes back to this process. Again, he re-emphasizes in these verses 17 and 18. He says that what is the nature of this nadi? He says that it is of twofold, which is, one is of the channels, that is the externalization. Nadi bandho bhimanascha dvayam granthirudirayet. Nadi bandhena sukshmopi sulam sarvam prapashyati. He says there are two kinds of granthi. There are two aspects to the knot. One is the knot which is external, which is with the body, the knot which has the body consciousness and the world consciousness. The other is the mind, the subtle one. And that subtle one, though subtle, is moving outward. It is moving outward and perceiving all these things. The mental attachment is what causes the physical attachment, says Bhagavan. The perceiver, though subtle, sees the entire world through the channel. So what has to be done? When the mind is withdrawn, so instead of allowing the subtle to become gross, let it become more refined, says Bhagavan. Nivrittam sarvanadibhyo yedaikam nadikam shrutam bhinna granthi tada jyotir atma bhavaya kalpate. The one who withdraws all the attention from these external nadis, takes it back and turns it back to the source, is called the one who has cut the knot. And that such a one is in Atma Bhava. Only the self pervades, only the one remains just as the self. Instead of remaining as the mind, instead of remaining as the intellect, instead of remaining as the body, not only is the knot with the physical attraction cut, they said the subtle attraction of the mind, which the mind and the intellect, those subtle attractions, even the good and the bad, one transcends that also and remains only as the self, says Bhagavan. Agni taptamayo golam drishyate gnimayam yatha swavichara santaptam tadhedam tadeyam tathedam swamayam bhavet tathedam swamayam bhavet. One who is pervaded with only self-awareness, he says that such a one's body is aglow. People have said that Bhagavan was radiant. Bhagavan is radiant. You see, what is that radiance? Humphrey says God was radiating terrifically through him. God was radiating terrifically through him. There was nothing else. He could not see Bhagavan as a physical form. He says it was just a corpse. There was a corpse through which God was radiating terrifically. This is what Bhagavan is referring to here. He says, when an iron ball is heated in a fire kiln, that iron ball becomes red hot. It is shining. It looks like it's red. It doesn't look as if it's iron. It looks as if it's fire itself. That is how everyone has experienced. Even though there is a body, the person becomes resplendent. There is a shining of the self through that person, says Bhagavan. Just to say that it is such a glorious state, that the body does not matter at all. Because the self alone is visible. The self alone is being communicated by Bhagavan to every one of us. And it is in order to communicate the self alone that Bhagavan stayed for 54 years after his enlightenment in Tiruvannamalai. Because he had attained. He says nothing further was there for him to do. There was no change in his state. Bhagavan clearly says there was no change in my state. From that moment on, the attention was completely in the self, which included and transcended everything. Which included everything, included the body also, included the world also, but transcended it. So why did Bhagavan stay there? The great ones are available to us in their physical form to communicate the glory of that state, to communicate that. Simple something, something we see a sweetness in Sattva Bhava. When anything is good, we see so much of sweetness there. So this is even beyond good. This is the ultimate good. This is the good which includes everything, which does not exclude anyone or anything. So that Atma Bhava, Bhagavan says, it shows itself as resplendent, like even a simple ball of iron can become resplendent with the fire. By that grace, The glory of that state is being told to us, so that by that grace we also get drawn back to that state which is our own. It is not only Bhagavan's state, it is our own state. It is available to each and everyone. It is universal. There is nobody who is denied this experience. So, in order to emphasize this, Bhagavan brings out the glory of this state in this chapter of Ramana Gita. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Apara Satchit Sukhavarirashi Yasyor Bimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami Chinta Vihiram Hrudi Chintayami